we're driving back, and we're thinking, well, I can be the co-chair, but we need to find a doctor. And 2 weeks prior to that, I attended a presentation at University Hospital's Rainbow and Baby Children's Hospital by a Dr. Remy, and I also met a Dr. Barksdale there. And I thought, well, you know what? I met a doctor over at University Hospital, Dr. Barksdale, and I'm going to call him and see if he'll co-chair this particular project we want to implement here in the city of Cleveland, which we call Operation Focus. And I called Dr. Barksdale, and he couldn't get on board quick enough with us, and he's in attendance today, and I'd just like to thank him one more time. Dr. Barksdale's back there in the corner. There was no hesitation. So how are we going to take this further? We're going, you know, there again, in these other cities, they did call-ins with adults. Director Griffin, our community relations director, he came up with a better idea. He says, well, let's start with juveniles and we'll move into the adults. And that's what we're doing. We've conducted 2 call-ins with juveniles so far, been very successful. The most successful part is the juveniles have transitioned into jobs and very positive things in life. So what we're going to do is continue with the juvenile call-ins, and we're going to implement the adult call-ins, and we're going to keep moving forward with this, because the point of the call-ins, when we call these individuals in, it isn't the individuals that are in the room per se. It's the message we're planning with them to take back to their gangs, or take back to their street corners, or take back wherever they take it, to say, hey, listen, there is help out there, and it's contingent on us, the kids on the street who are on the edge, to make the right choice. The right choice is we will provide them assistance to get them through whatever problems they may have. But continue the call-ins right now. We're going to push those very hard.
If funding were not an issue, where would you like to be able to allocate your resource? I'm going to let you put on your city planner hat for a moment today. And just give us an idea, if we didn't have some of our economic constraints that we do have, where you would like to see some additional funding, or where you think that would be most advantageous to helping you combat crime in the city.
Well, let me say this, and we know it's true across this country. Additional resources being funding, you can add more police officers, more equipment, more technology, more everything. And will we reduce crime? Yes. Will we push it around? Yes. Will we prevent crime? No. So when we talk about funding, I believe equal shares have to go to law enforcement, because we push people in corners, but then you have to have the other funding. When we push people in corners, most of the time, if you give people options, they'll take the right option. So as the law enforcement agencies push people in corners, we have to give them options. And that's where additional funding has to go, to those options. Do they have the option of getting a job, graduating from high school, whatever it may be? So, I mean, we could load all our funding in the law enforcement and pound the heck out of it, but that's still not preventing crime. And sometimes, when you push people in corners, you know, you have to remember, you know, if we've got 100 kids out there, 90 of those kids are good kids. Basically, they're good kids. Now, you may have 10 in that group you're not going to save. But most of them are good kids. But if we're pushing them and we don't give them options, some way, somehow, they're going to come out of that corner. More violent, with chips on their shoulders, etc. So getting back to funding, sure, the police department could use more funding, but equal shares of funding has to go towards our social services to provide jobs and opportunities and activities for our children. And the younger we can identify our children, the higher probability and percentages will save them.
Good afternoon, Chief McGrath and elected officials, Mayor. My question is towards the juvenile court system and the partnership that the police have. In the 2nd District, we have a problem with youth, and the youth know that they'll get arrested, they go to court, they get a slap on the wrist, they're back out on the street causing more troubles. So how can we better partner with the juvenile court system and the court system in general to use better restraints or technology or education for the youth that are just being completely recycled through the system and going back out and doing the same thing over and over again?
Okay, that's Councilman, that's a very difficult question. Let me just say this, though. I think our juvenile court system can hold about 70, 80 individuals. Currently, they're tapped out with about 200. Let me also say this, putting people in jail doesn't solve the problem. Once they get to jail, once they get to juvenile court, once they come in front of a judge, they have exhibited some symptom of a social ill. And to really be straight up with you and give you the correct answer is we need to identify what those social ills may be and put our resources there and prevent the symptoms of crime, to bring them to the juvenile court.
Chief, in a totally different direction, we had the Secretary of Homeland Security here about a week and a half ago. Are there demands or needs placed on the Cleveland Police Department that relate to Homeland Security, and are those adequately funded from Washington? Are there, in effect, unfunded requirements that you all have to deal with? We have a port here and other aspects of the bigger national security issue. Would you talk about those?
I can, but I may just go off the topic a little bit, because it's like being in court and they've got you on the witness stand and a defense attorney will ask you a question, it gives you an opening, and you gave me a little bit of an opening there. So I apologize. I may run with it. It's just from me. But we do receive funding from the federal government relative to Homeland Security, and it has been adequate. They've been cutting back a little bit. I know there's things we'd like funded that they won't fund for us, and the expert on that is sitting right behind you. It's Director Norberto Colon. He deals with all the funding coming from the government. He's the one that monitors the funding, and he's the one that dispenses it throughout the city of Cleveland. And when the funding does come in, we also have to share it with our state, county, and local partners. So there's a lot of politics involved, but we do get funding. It's been cut down a little bit, but it's still coming in, and there's still concerns relative to Homeland Security. There's no question about it. But, or if I can just do a left turn on you just for 1 second real quick here, you know, way back when, 8, 9, 10 years ago, we used to have a lot of funding for our inner cities, and that funding was cut tremendously. And I just want to say that anybody that ever played on a sports team, they always say that the team is only as strong as its weakest link. And as a society, our weakest link currently is our urban cities. So if we don't bolster up our inner cities, especially education-wise, family-wise, et cetera, at some point, not in my lifetime, not my kid's lifetime, but in somebody's lifetime, we're going to have a real issue here in the United States as a society. So, you know, there is the threat of Homeland Security, but we also have to consider equally the threat we have in our urban cities as far as educating our young people and changing our culture to make sure, in fact, they're not our weakest link, they're our strongest link. Yeah, just a quick statistic, and I received this over at Rainbow and Babies Children's Hospital, and Dr. Barksdale, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was amazed. I went to a presentation out there, and the mortality rate for our infants in Cleveland is as high as a third world country. And we have, in Cleveland, some of the best hospice facilities in the world. I mean, what message is that telling us? Am I correct, Dr.
It's actually higher than something.
So, I mean, that in itself, I mean, when I'm talking about social ills, folks, that's what I'm talking about. If we don't correct those things, these crimes, these are symptoms of something else that we have to identify and really address. We really have to address, lay the infrastructure for the generations that follow us, or there will be a problem.
Good afternoon, Chief. In talking about the recidivism rate and how high it is, and the fact that, particularly in this country, we believe that we can arrest our way out, can you talk a little bit about community-based corrections and the power of guided reentry as a way to decrease the recidivism rate?
Great question. The theme of our transition committee was review the past, secure the present, and plan for the future. All these enforcement actions fall somewhere in there. And secure the present comes to this particular reentry type programs.